had a chance to read through everyone's discussion board post on Module 2. And while I'm not able to comment on every single person's post, know that I do read them all. And I wanted to comment and provide some feedback on some of the more interesting posts. I think there was some really great discussion, and I particularly want to highlight 3 of them and encourage you to read their posts. So the discussion was around what functions or services does your firm decide to outsource, and then talk about why that decision was made and how that might affect your job in the future, and whether or not your particular occupation or role is potentially subject to being outsourced. So one of the comments was from Jorge Mercado. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I definitely want you to read this post. And he had a discussion about outsourcing within the military. And he talked about how the military outsources equipment maintenance, janitorial services, food services, logistics, and even in some cases, security services were actually outsourced. It was a very interesting post about why the military decided to do this and what some of the limitations were around outsourcing these functions. So in particular, there's a United Nations resolution that he made reference to regarding basically hiring mercenaries. And so he said that his particular position was extremely unlikely to be outsourced because it was a combat position, and as such, a combat position was not going to be outsourced for legal reasons. So that's certainly one way to make sure that your position is not going to be outsourced if you have the force of law behind it. And there was another post by Richard Carpenter on there who made some interesting comments as well, being in the military himself. So highly encourage you to read that post. The other post was from Gene Schultz, talked about the Colorado Center for Nursing Excellence. It's a nonprofit that was dedicated to assuring an adequate nursing workforce in Colorado. And she talked about some of the decisions that were made by that organization in terms of outsourcing. And they made a conscious decision not to outsource their director of development. And so for a nonprofit, they often hire development officers or development directors in order to raise funds for the organization. And it makes perfect sense that you wouldn't want to outsource that function, because if the organization is outsourcing its development, how passionate are they about their mission if they can't even hire someone to explain the mission and what the organization is and the good work that it does in the community. So I thought that was a really insightful comment about how, even though it might not be the core function of the firm or the organization, right? The organization is really designed around matching supply and demand for nurses. Nevertheless, they made a very conscious and I think appropriate decision to keep the development officer in-house in order to make sure that they were effective in raising funds. The third post I want you to read was by Erica Yang, and she talked about her job as an unpaid intern for a theater company. And many of you posted that your companies outsource janitorial services, which tends to make sense. That's certainly in most cases a non-core competency of a firm. But Erica's comment was that when she was an intern, the company decided not to outsource the janitorial services because the supervisor, in fact, made all of the unpaid interns do the janitorial services work to, quote, pay their dues. Now, kind of as a side note, you got to be careful with that. And I actually explicitly responded to that post, Erica, that there are rules and regulations around what work you can actually require unpaid interns to do, because we have minimum wage laws. If you if you pay a person or if you don't pay a person to do a certain type of work, then that might run into some potential legal issues. So there are obviously carve-outs for minimum wage, such as unpaid internships, and the unpaid internship itself is not illegal. But the work has to be related to a similar type of training that you would receive in an educational institution. And so there's some, I would argue, potentially some questions around whether or not you can actually have an unpaid intern do janitorial services types of work. I'm not a lawyer, don't pretend to be one, but I would recommend that you read the post that or the link that I included on your post on the discussion board. Some other comments, I think a lot of good discussion back and forth if you read through some of them. I appreciate that those who were in IT typically responded to other posts of classmates who are also working in IT because you could share that information better. I think people who were in arts functions, people who were in medicine, I appreciate that you responded and provide some insightful feedback in that particular occupation. I thought there were some interesting comments on issues related to security as one of the reasons why it wasn't outsourced. So, for example, if the company is working with sensitive data, then there was a decision not to outsource IT, for example, because there might have been issues there. Just a few other comments. Some of the most commonly outsourced functions that people cited were IT, payroll, legal, janitorial services, etc. Some people actually commented that it might be cheaper to hire IT internally rather than being outsourced. So there's always a cost-benefit decision being made when the decision is taken to outsource a particular function. I think a couple people made comments that one of the reasons why the function was outsourced was because the firm didn't want to do it. And that's not really a great reason or explanation. There needs to be a conscious cost-benefit decision being made on whether or not to outsource or keep in-house a particular function. Now, the cost-benefit decision, it's complicated, right? It might not be as simple as just the immediate cost and the immediate benefits of say, outsourcing payroll. Several of you mentioned the idea of a core competency. It might actually make more strategic sense in the long term to maybe outsource some of those functions that are perhaps profitable, but may in fact take away or distract the firm from focusing on those competencies that will really drive long-term growth. And so I thought it was insightful for several of you to make that comment around core competencies. So I think that's pretty much it. I think the discussion boards have been quite good. I've been impressed with some of the comments, and I encourage you again to introduce yourself to those people in your field that have made comments on your post. By far, one of the best advantages of joining the MBA is to meet other people, network with them, and understand some of the challenges that they face in their business, and maybe provide some insights there. So there will be an exam at the end of next week. I'll send out an email with some more information around that. But keep up the good work. As always, if you have any questions about the discussion board or any of the homework, feel free to let me know. I'm always available by email, by phone, and certainly happy to have a video conference as well if that helps. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.